In the Pickwick papers, every so often a character will depart from the main narrative and tell a story. I do the same in Death of Mr Pickwick, and so here is a tale told by an inmate in the Fleet Prison for Debtors to a fellow prisoner. Until about 7 or 8 years ago, on the north side of the Strand, there used to be the menagerie at Exeter Change. My father used to take me when I was a boy. For a shilling you could go to the upper floors and see things which you would previously only have seen in pictures. You could get right up close to a tiger and a hippopotamus, and you would hear the animals' noises on the street when you walked by. My father told me that drivers were always wary about taking a new horse down the Strand because the horse might bolt. There were even animals I had never heard of. A tapir, that was one. And there was a lion and a hyena and a panther and a jackal. Even a 60-foot skeleton of a sperm whale. That skeleton amazed me. But in one of these cages was the menagerie's greatest attraction, a huge male elephant. 11 feet tall and 7 imperial tons. That's what they used to shout at the entrance to attract people in. You had to pay an extra shilling to see the elephant, but it was worth it. Its tusks poked through the bars, and it would do tricks. It would take off a man's hat, or steal his wallet. If you held up a sixpenny piece, the elephant would take it from your hand and then return it to you. And there was a bell it would ring, and that would be when the meat man was about to come, and that would set the whole menagerie roaring in expectation. My father said it was like a crowd on election day. Well, the elephant was called Chunee. If I remember rightly, he had been captured in Bombay when he was very young and shipped to London. He even used to be hired out to perform at the Theatre Royal in a show, and his keeper would take him out and walk him down the Strand. When he was a very young elephant, he couldn't be happier. He wouldn't mind people stroking him, and the children would touch his trunk. I did that myself when I was very small, but as he grew older, he got into bad moods. And Chunee's moods got worse every year. My mother said it was because he didn't have a lady elephant for company. My father, though, said it was because of all the sugary foods the public had given him, which had rotted his teeth, because Chunee would eat half the sugar in West India docks on buns given half a chance. Whatever the cause, every year the moods got worse. Some people thought it funny to imitate the trumpeting sounds of an elephant near the cage, and when they did that, it got Chunee wild and would strike the bars with his trunk. Well, the keepers started to get scared. My father once showed me a report in the newspaper about how Chunee had accidentally crushed a keeper to death. I think Chunee turned round in his cell and he stove in a keeper's rib cage, if it was an accident. It's not surprising the keepers got scared. I remember seeing Chunee roll around on the floor of his cage, and you imagine all that weight rolling on top of you. One day, Chunee went truly wild. He started smashing the bars with his trunk again and again. Now these bars were very strong. They were oak and bound up with steel. But Chunee was determined to get out. He kept on striking the bars, bash, 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 without stopping. Then the keepers noticed that one of the bars was starting to detach itself from a crossbeam. They were very scared. Well, you think about what would happen if the bars broke away from the bricks. There were other dangerous animals, lions and tigers and all sorts of beasts. And if Chunee broke his own cage and got out, who could stop him? The cage of a lion would crumple if he ran wild against it. Imagine the Strand full of all these creatures and all the chaos that would happen. It's quite funny when you think about it. So a decision was made. Poor Chunee, who had given so much pleasure, had to die. Now, there was a keeper who is supposed to have loved Chunee. I heard that he believed that one day the elephant would come right again and go back to being the way he used to be, nice and docile. This was the keeper who was given the task of putting poison in the elephant's hay. But an animal with a nose that big is going to smell that there is something the matter with his food. Or perhaps Chunee just knew they were up to something. He wouldn't touch the hay. So there was no alternative. The soldiers from Somerset House were sent for. A couple of soldiers came and they sent out a message in the neighbourhood for anyone with a gun and the courage to come along. Quite a few men did, about 10 or 15 I believe. Now Chunee probably wouldn't have seen a musket before. He would have seen a gentleman's walking stick and he might have thought a musket was a stick too, and he didn't panic. So the soldiers and the others lined up in front of his cage. The keeper, who loved Chunee, had taught him to understand some commands, and so he told the elephant to kneel. And the elephant, docile as anything, just like in the old days, got down slowly to its knees. The muskets were raised. Some aimed for the legs and some for the chest, and the order was given. Bang, 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 bang. There were terrible noises that came from Chunee as the bullets struck, but he was not defeated. He got to his feet and charged the bars. The men shot again, aiming for the parts they thought most sensitive. Blood was now pouring from Chunee all over the floor, pools of it mixed up with hay. Round after round the men fired, shooting everywhere they thought would work, but the elephant still wouldn't fall. The shooting went on for more than an hour. They said you could hear Chunee's agony right down the Strand. Crowds started gathering, wanting to watch the events. The authorities wouldn't let them, though some are supposed to have offered 2 guineas for a good view. But even then, Chunee wouldn't die. The commanding officer, shaking all over, decided to enter the cage. He had to be careful because there was still life in the beast, and the floor was slippery with blood. Well, he drew his sword and strapped it to the end of his musket somehow and plunged it into the neck. And that was it for poor Chunee. I remember all the pictures being sold afterwards, showing the elephant kneeling behind the bars as the musketeers fired. Coloured they were, grey and red. I went to the menagerie a couple of days later. So did hundreds of others. They were queuing on the street to get in. They charged £1 to see the animal hewn by a team of Smithfield butchers, cutting off the hide and taking 12 hours to do it. Well, in something that big, there's bound to be something worth having. But the fact was, nothing was wasted. The meat was sold by the butchers, and they handed out sheets with recipes for elephant stew. My mother brought some elephant meat home. It was red, almost purple. We had it for Sunday dinner and it tasted like, I don't know, I tried some deer once, a bit like that. And Chunee's hide was made into belts and shoes and wallets and goodness knows what else. Then they brought in a sawbones who dissected the animal with the help of a team of eager medical students. Finally, there was Chunee's skeleton standing on display in his old cage. I saw the bullet holes in the skull. When they pulled down the menagerie, they auctioned off the skeleton and got £100 for it, I think. Who knows where it is now? Perhaps you will find out in Death and Mr Pickwick.